Hi everyone. This PowerPoint is meant to give you a little more information about Piaget and summarizing some of his important contributions to educational psychology. So, Piaget today. Piaget raised all the right questions and his overall vision was quite important, but there have been many educational psychologists who have done a tremendous amount of research since Piaget. Some of his ideas have been a bit discounted or diluted. It's thought that perhaps he underestimated certain aspects of cognitive development or was too rigid in his representation. So you'll see as we go kind of talk about this that he had distinct grade levels, age levels for his hypothesized states of cognitive development. Two important concepts, though, that we still talk about a lot today and still use in our everyday teaching lives are the ideas of assimilation and accommodation. So assimilation is the process by which a person takes material into the mind from the environment. In other words, this is where we're taking things in, but the accommodation is the difference it makes to us by assimilating it. And they go together. You can't have one without the other. You can't accommodate something without assimilating it first. One of the difficulties here is that this theory doesn't take into account possible innate cognitive abilities. There's been lots of arguments about that, whether our cognitive learning is nurtured or by nature. And I think that there's still a lot of controversy and conversation about that. But nonetheless, this doesn't quite take into account the possibility that someone has those innate abilities. The role of maturation, and this is growing up. Piaget believed that children could not undertake tasks until they were psychologically mature enough to do so. Our school curricula today is based on Piaget's idea that there are certain points in maturation where a child can move into more complex new areas and capacities. Sorry, I left the I out of child there, and I think I used the wrong tense of the verb too. You have to excuse me. But nonetheless, it's important for us to understand his theories. So here is his stages of cognitive development. The first one is sensory motor, which is birth through age 2. And this is characterized by the sensory motor or touching and grasping. And if you can imagine an infant to toddler, that's sort of really how they're taking in cognitive ideas by touching things, by reaching for things. One aspect of this that's important to remember is the idea of gaining object permanence. In other words, understanding that objects in the environment continue to exist even if you can't see them. And if you're a parent or you've been around children, you've played the game of hide the toy. And at certain stages, that can really frustrate a child because they think it's gone completely. They haven't yet gained the ability to understand that simply because it's hidden doesn't mean that it's gone away. And then pre-operational, ages 2 to 7, this is where children begin to acquire words, okay, the semiotic function of using words and symbols. So in other words, knowing that a globe represents the earth and knowing that the word earth is that as well. And that's the example your text gives. This is also when children begin to do this pretend play, where they're imitating and pretending and so forth and so on. This stage is perception-based, egocentric, and pre-logical. So in other words, logic really doesn't play into this at all, and children are very much into themselves. It's all about me. They're the center of their own worlds, and they only perceive the only things they excuse me. Let me rephrase that. Perception-based indicates that it's only the things that they perceive, okay, that they're not doing this sort of abstract thinking or imagining what could be. It's what they see in front of them and that they perceive. And the third group is this concrete operational, which are ages 7 through 11. And this is where their mental capacity becomes more dynamic rather than static, more decentered. It's not so much all about them. They're not so egocentrical, or learning to become not egocentrical. And they start beginning to understand logic and being able to have inductive and deductive reasoning. the stages between the pre-operational and the concrete operational, there are some mental capacities that are shift here. It's important for us to understand these. They're animism, centration, transductive reasoning, egocentrism, reversibility, classification, and seriation. I'm going to go through each one of those. So animism is the belief that all things are living. I mean, when when children are moving between these two stages, as Piaget theorized, they begin to distinguish animate and inanimate objects and know that some things are not living. Centration is focusing on object's most prominent feature while neglecting other features. So I'm only seeing something's height or weight or width or depth or color. And as children move between these two stages, they begin to see that it's not just what they perceive, that there could be some misleading physical appearances, and they can focus on more than one thing on a particular object. Transductive reasoning is if two events happen simultaneously, one must have caused the other. So it's this cause and effect. And as children mature, they come to realize that just because something happened doesn't mean that that's caused something else to happen. It could. Cause and effect is something that's important, but not every event causes something else. Egocentrism, again, this is viewing the world from one's own perspective without realizing that somebody else might have a different perspective. As children mature, we hope that they become more aware of others' perspectives and understand that they can be different from their own. Okay, you can being able to see the world from both ways. Egocentrism is an interesting concept, and we could talk about how, even though as we mature and grow, some people still hang on to an egocentric kind of thinking. It doesn't mean that they're not capable of thinking outside their own little world, but we know that people do tend to hang on to that sometimes. Reversibility. This is the ability to reverse an action by performing its opposite. Your book gives the example that, for instance, 2 beads can be attached to 3 to make 5, and 2 can be subtracted to 5 to go back to the original 3. Those children who have not quite reached that stage can't undo an action. If they see something taken away, they can't understand that if you put it back, it will make it whole again. Reversibility. Sorry about that. That was my dogs. Well, my dog and my daughter's dog barking at something they heard outside. As I had mentioned before, I do live in a menagerie, it does seem like, so I apologize for that. So classification is this grouping of objects into categories, being able to understand that there are many different categories and that there are hierarchies of things belonging to those categories. Your book gives the example of understanding that Texas is part of the whole United States, and that we're just not one category. Then seriation is the ability to order or arrange a set of objects, being able to look at, say, different widths of something or different lengths and arrange them in some kind of order. And then the final stage that Piaget theorizes is formal operational 11, age 11 and up, where thought becomes logical and abstract, where one now can imagine what is possible, consider unseen tasks, and solve abstract problems. So why is this important for schools? Well, these stages were taken to mean that before the ages that Piaget outlined in these stages, the children were not capable of understanding things in a certain way. But I think we know that's a little rigid in terms of we know many proteges who can do things well ahead of the categories that Piaget laid out. And I think we could argue we know many adults that really have not quite reached the formal operations, or if they have, it's not at a stage where Piaget imagined it would be. And so, as I noted before, the evidence collected by educational psychologists suggests that these stages are too lockstep and too rigid. But they still give us a nice framework of thinking about the various developmental stages of children. Some children manage, and I spelled that wrong. My goodness, I've got to be a little more careful with my editing. Concrete operations earlier, and some people never attain them or don't use them. Okay, so again, a little bit too rigid. So some tensions here. Again, Piaget believed intelligence was a single general capacity that developed pretty much the same way in all individuals. So we all have this capacity for intelligence. Yet Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences theorizes that there are many intelligences that can develop independently and can function, interact in multiple ways. And if you take a Gardner's theories of multiple intelligence survey, it will help you, and you probably already know this anyway, the ways in which you learn the best. For me, I'm a very, very sort of verbal person. In other words, words. I'm a word person. I like to read, and I learn a lot with words. But I also and sort of a visual learner too. So when I see things, that helps me. So my verbal intelligence and my hands-on intelligence work together to provide me with the capacity to learn. And there are other intelligences as well: musical, a natural, kinesthetic. And so the idea that we just develop intelligence in one way really has been discounted by Gardner and others. But Piaget really was the father of cognitive constructivism. His theories laid the groundwork for this further investigation. Brunner and Vygotsky emphasized language and the influence of other people in enabling children to learn. And Vygotsky is included in this chapter. I'm not going to go into detail on Vygotsky today. I am going to talk more about him after we've read about the behaviorists. So I'll have a little more information and go over Vygotsky in more depth at that time. Contributions that have lasted, despite that his concepts have been undermined. His idea of discovery-based learning, project-based learning, curiosity-inducing strategies, and working within a child's interest area. These are all things that Piaget contributed to educational theory, and they're all things that continue today in terms of understanding that these particular strategies really do work in the classroom. So that's it for Piaget, just a little reinforcing for you. There's a lot in this chapter to read, so make sure you read it carefully. And again, if you have questions and things you want to discuss with your group, in your group discussion forum, there's a place for miscellaneous talking and sharing, as well as in the whole group discussion forum. There's a place for noting things that are not particularly assigned to you. So please use those forums to, if you feel that you would like to point out something or something's not being pointed out in the reading or the assignments. Have a great day.